Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3Tier, and welcome to another episode of the People's Questions, where I answer all the questions that you guys have sent me over the past week. And boy, I gotta say, we got a big one. I think there's like maybe 20 questions, which, you know, I would normally say I think that's a record, but I've said that so many times this year, I can just officially say it's probably going to be one of the longer episodes that we've done this year. So, starting off with the first question, coming from Harshly Critical, and you want to know, what did I think of the Devil May Cry 5 Ultimate Edition cost? I think it's ridiculous. I'm sure somebody's going to pay that much for it, but I wouldn't. I think like the most I've ever spent on any collector's edition is like $250, and I think that was on the Final Fantasy 15 Ultimate Edition. But yeah, no, I don't care how cool the jackets are, and there's only 3 of them. Not worth it. I'm sticking with the deluxe edition, and that's good enough for me. Next question comes from Scarpino. You want to know, is there any game that I personally really liked but others didn't, and you can't see why? One game does come to mind, but the only part of your question that doesn't apply is I think I can understand why people didn't like it as much, and that's Resident Evil 5. Really liked it. It's not perfect, it's got its flaws, but I really liked it. I can understand how some older fans would not particularly like it all that much, because it's definitely much more action focused, and now that you throw in the co-op aspect, that definitely reduces the horror aspect significantly. But heck, I'm a fan of it, and if you actually go by the numbers, Resident Evil 5 is probably one of Capcom's best-selling games that they've ever made, so apparently somebody liked it. Next question comes from Lugina 13. You want to know, do I think that a Devil May Cry without Dante could ever work? Or do I think that fans would give everyone hell if they even having that idea? I don't really think fans are against Dante not being in a Devil May Cry game. I mean, yeah, he has been the main protagonist of the franchise. But I think that as long as they gave him a good sending off, I think fans would be open for a new protagonist. I mean, I'm personally open to the idea that I think this might happen, is that for these new set of God of War games, I can easily see them kind of easily moving Kratos out of the way and having his son take over the franchise, because, you know, spoiler alert, they've kind of semi-confirmed that Atreus is going to meet the God of War of the North world, and somehow he might get his title. So in effect, his son is going to become the God of War for that world, and he's just an older God of War from a different area. And so the title is confirmed, and yet we've had all this time to build up with him. I think that if he took over the franchise, I think people would be open for that. I think the same thing will work for Dante. I mean, they have stated that this game is supposed to be the end of the whole Sparta timeline. So if they gave Dante a good sending off and they decide to move the franchise forward with Nero, I would be open for that. I mean, I don't see why anyone would be against that. Next question comes from BU Blader 1. You want to know, how would I tier Noctis? Okay, basically you want to know where would I rank him in his ultimate form. If we're talking about the 10-year gap and you could keep that form all day like you can in the final battle, he'd probably be one of the more powerful characters. Do I think he could take down Canon Sephiroth? Absolutely. I mean, at that point, he's so immensely powerful, but it's kind of weird because you still you're still losing health as you're using that ability, so it's kind of a weird combination. But yeah, I think he'd be a top tier combatant. A little OP though. Next question comes from the Paper Knight. You want to know, would I like to have more villain episodes in future Final Fantasy games? And you're pretty much talking about the new episode that they're doing for Final Fantasy 15. How, you know, a few episodes were canceled, but I think they still have like one more that's going to come out. I wouldn't mind, but I'm not a fan of this particular villain. I just wasn't a fan of him. But if they wanted to do more stories that focus more on the villains, I'd be open for that. And that goes into the next question. Or it doesn't quite go into it, but the next question after that comes from Phantom City. So you want to know, what are some of my earliest memories playing video games? Well, that's easy. The very first console slash handheld I ever played was the Game Boy Pocket, which was that giant fat ass gray one that had the greenish blackish screen. The first video game I ever played on it was Super Mario World, which is still a game I would like to go back and play because I actually still have a slimmed down Game Boy Pocket. It's silver. The first console I ever played was a Super Nintendo that my cousin brought over, and I think the first game I ever played on that was also Super Mario World. So I think it's fair to say that Mario really was the very first video game I ever actually played. And I played a bunch of other games, like on the NES, a couple of games that stand out to me. Mortal Kombat, Doom, Michael Jordan and Win City. Some people might not know what I'm talking about, but that was definitely popular back in the day. Yes, Michael Jordan did have his own game. But yeah, those are just some of my earliest memories of how I started to become a gamer. But I wouldn't say that I became a big gamer until probably the PlayStation era. So yeah. The next question comes from Casty J. Williams, and you want to know, besides Mr. Freeze, what is my least favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger performance? I actually like Mr. Freeze. I found it hilarious, but if I really think about Arnold Schwarzenegger characters that I wasn't a big fan of, the only one that comes to mind was actually from one of his more recent films, and it's called Killing Gunther. And my problem with that film is not so much his performance. I just kind of hate how all the promotion, all the buildup was to have Arnold Schwarzenegger in that film, and he's like hardly in the film. He has like 7 minutes of screen time, like an hour and a half long movie. He's the character that this whole thing is supposed to be focused around, and he has less than 7 minutes of screen time, and he's basically just kind of a parody of every character he's played throughout his career. And there's a really hilarious fight scene in it, and he's kind of reciting some of his lines from his more popular films, and I just thought that was just kind of cheap. So that's like the only character that I can think of off the top of my head that I just wasn't a big fan of. I really think that they should have used him more in that film because I thought it was a waste. Next question comes from Young Y, and I think you're new, so welcome. And you want to know, what was the first game that I played or made me feel in the game? Okay, well, I just told you what was the first video game I ever played, but the first game that made me feel like I was in the game? From my earliest memory, it was probably Doom, because that was the very first-person shooter game I ever played. And so playing a game in that perspective felt odd, because I kind of felt like I was Doom guy, even though I was a child, so I didn't quite understand that I was supposed to be playing a character. I thought that was supposed to be me, and this is just like my screen. This is what I'm looking at. So I guess that's the best explanation I can think of a game that made me feel like I was in the game at an earlier age. Next question comes from Notorious 1972, and you want to know, what do I think is my favorite non-Final Fantasy boss of all time? Oh, easy. I would have to say the Metal Gear Ray boss fight in Metal Gear Solid 4. That is by far my favorite boss fight of any Metal Gear Solid game of all time, and it's still to this day one of my favorite bosses of all time. Next question comes from Shadow Des Gamer, and you want to know, do I think Voldemort is a Darth Sidious ripoff? I can see how some might think that, but I definitely think that there's a number of differences in terms of their backstory. Like Sidious didn't start out evil. That's the thing. Voldemort was always evil. I mean, even if you go back to his early days, he was always a really, really evil person. I mean, he did have a kind of messed up upbringing, but that doesn't justify things he did at that time. There are a lot of similarities, but I think that Sidious is much more of a manipulator than Voldemort. I don't think Voldemort is the manipulator that he is. I think he has his followers out of fear and loyalty, but he's kind of a fanatic and he wants, to rule. And Sidious wants to do that too, but it's a little bit different. But I could definitely see the comparisons. Next question comes from the Turkey of Neo Gotham, and you want to know, since Edward vs. Connor was my last Assassin's Creed Versus video, were there other characters from the franchise that I had in mind for using in my battles? Maybe. I thought about using, Ezio from Brotherhood, because I think that's him at his prime. Assassin's Creed is difficult because I haven't played all of them, and so I would only use characters from the games I did play, and so I think I had ideas of using Ezio versus Shay, but I think that'd be a little bit too one-sided. But yeah, that's what I can think of off the top of my head that I really had thoughts of doing. Those kind of matchups, I kind of like to go to you guys for ideas, because you guys some have like really good ideas. Next question comes from Brady Burke, and you want to know, what do I think is the life message of Metal Gear Solid franchise? A life message? That's a tough one. I guess, a life message. Self-sacrifice, living, trying to not letting the sins of your life be passed on to the next generation. Stuff like that, I think, are some of the life lessons that, at least that I learned. I mean, one of the greatest virtues that I ever learned from Metal Gear Solid is the importance of loyalty, and that is, that's probably one of the biggest characteristics that some people who know me say I have, and that's I'm incredibly loyal. Like, once you guys really get to, if anyone gets to know me in real life, like, trust me, whether it's a friendship or a relationship, I am fiercely loyal. Trust me, someone picks on you. I mean, if anybody needs any hand, like, you don't even have to hesitate to ask for my help. I'll be there as fast as I can. And heck, in some cases, like for my brother, in case, I'll move heaven and earth to help him out if he needed. Like, if he was ever in trouble where he's at, I will literally stop what I'm doing, whether I'm here or at work, and I will get on a flight and I will go over there and help him out if the moment came. But yeah, I would say those are just a couple of things that I learned. Next question comes from Hugo Bled 881, and you want to know, given Revan's abilities as a Force user and teacher, if he had been around during the prequels, would he have made a good teacher for Anakin? Oh no, oh dear God, no, that would be a very, very bad idea. The problem with Revan being a teacher is that Revan has a fascination with the dark side. And he is a bit of a fanatic, and you don't really want to install those type of ideas into Anakin. I don't really think Anakin had really a fascination with the dark side until Sidious implanted and said that, the dark side, you can use it for a good reason. Revan never had those intentions. I mean, he was just about, taking out the enemy and doing whatever it took to do it, whether you use the light side or the dark side at all. So no, I do not think Revan would make a very good teacher for Anakin, at least not at that period of time. Next question comes from Black Lady, and I believe you too are a newbie. Welcome. And you want to know, which weapon would I rather have, the Master Sword or the Blades of Olympus? Probably the Blade of Olympus. I think it can do a little bit more, although it is a little bit big. So yeah, probably that. And besides, I'm more of a God of War fan than Zelda fan anymore. I haven't played a Zelda game in like 15 years. Next question comes from the Immortal Superbeing. You want to know, do I think that Fargo, the guy who created the Fargo Plague in Zero Dawn, is one of the most pure evil villains ever? It's not that he's evil, it's just he set up conditions that if anything went wrong, it would be really, really bad, and he didn't really have a good backup plan, and then when he decided to kill the Alphas, he was just kind of stupid because he just thought that, you're going to repeat our mistake, so I have to kill you Alphas so that the new race of humans isn't corrupted by mistakes that we made. And I thought that was a stupid idea because Elizabeth Cho specifically chose these people so that wouldn't happen. So he clearly had no faith in her plan. So it's not that he's evil, it's just he was just dumb. He was just a really, really dumb person who refused to take responsibility for something he caused. Or he had no backup plan. I mean, it's one of those situations like, why would you build a weapon? Why would you create something that if you lost control of it for any amount of time, it would be bad for everybody? Like, why would you do that? Next question comes from JBat. He wants to know, what are my thoughts on Stan Lee's death? Sad. I mean, I never met the guy, but he seemed like a really, really nice guy. He created my favorite solo Marvel character of all time, Spider-Man, and as far as I can remember, Spider-Man was his favorite character, so we have that in common. It's sad that he's gone, but he's left an amazing legacy. I mean, even long after he's gone, there's going to be generations of comic book fans that are still going to be reading characters and being inspired by some of his work. So, if anything, I think he has the amazing opportunity to have left such a lasting legacy. I mean, that's something that not a lot of people in human history can do. And he's going to have such a massive impact moving forward, even though he's not around anymore. So, if anything, we should mourn, but his life should be celebrated because he's done something incredible. There's no way any of us could have believed that his work would be in the state it is now like 30 years ago. And so it's amazing he got to live it, see to grow to such an amazing status. So I think even in his last moments, I think he felt like he was pretty proud of his work, and I think we all should be proud of that. So, yeah. Next question comes from Silverleonhardt 2099. You want to know, who do I think would win if Anakin had reached his full potential? Okay, so basically, who do I think would win? Anakin if he reached his full potential, or Grandmaster Luke? That's such a strange question, because even if Anakin had reached his full potential, he's not really much for using the Force. And I just think that Luke has so many more abilities. I mean, even though technically Anakin should be more powerful, I think that Grandmaster Luke had more experience against such powerful opponents. Anakin's list of abilities, even if he reaches full potential, would be very limited. I mean, there's a number of powers that, like, even if he went to his maximum, there's a number of powers I don't think he would have ever learned, because he wouldn't have that drive. I mean, that's the one thing about Anakin. He's the most powerful Force user, yet he has no drive to learn these extraordinary powers. And yet it's funny because he didn't learn to do this until he became Vader. And yet he never would have learned that had he not become Vader. And so I think that's a very interesting twist. Next question comes from BillZ, and you want to know, have I heard of the 3 upcoming Final Fantasy 15 DLCs being canceled? The director is leaving and Square Enix is losing $33 million because of it. Yes, I heard of that story, and to be honest, I don't really have many thoughts on it. I haven't played Final Fantasy 15 in some time, so yeah, I don't really have much of an opinion on it, but that's a lot of money that's been wasted. And the last question of the episode comes from Deathstroke, awesome name, welcome to the channel, and oh dear God. Oh dear. Oh boy. I saw this question. I forgot all about it, but this is one of those questions where I really thought for like a day or two, should I go off? I thought about adding some crazy effects to this video to kind of express how I feel about this question, but you know what? I'm gonna keep it professional. You obviously are new, you don't know this about me, so it's not your fault. I would go off if someone who knew me pulled this stunt off, and they did it on purpose. But you're new, you don't know about me, okay, I'm gonna keep myself calm and answer your question like a civilized human being. Have I played The Last of Us? And will I play The Last of Us 2? Yes. I have played The Last of Us. And no, I will not be playing The Last of Us 2. For very personal reasons, and reasons that if I were to go in depth, it would involve a lot of shouting and screaming, and probably me breaking something, me expressing my overall hatred. And see, I'm even starting to even get to that point, but I'm going to keep myself calm and reserved and just say, let's just say, not a big fan of The Last of Us, therefore I have no intention on playing the sequel. And that's where I'll leave it. So with that said, that ends this episode of People's Questions. I would like to thank all of you guys that sent in your questions and making this episode probably pretty long, I'm guessing. But if you guys have any more questions you'd like me to answer in next week's episode, next Friday, be sure to type them in the comments down below. But make sure you get them into me for next Wednesday, roughly around noon, start filming the next episode. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will see you next time.